I'm an addict. My name is Gene. I want to thank any and all people who are responsible for asking me to share tonight. I don't know how much I'll get into the specifics of it. I have spoken a number of times since I've been here, which has been a while. But I don't do tapes. I don't hand tapes out. I don't send them out. I don't share them. I don't keep them. And so those members who offered my name as a possibility to share tonight, those members who voted on me being here tonight, took a chance. I think it was a good chance. You all be the judge of that sometime this evening. Another thing I need to tell you is that I'm a storyteller. I came into this fellowship and I didn't have one story, not one, that wasn't a lie. I had a lot of stories that were lies that I was so good at telling that after a while I couldn't tell you what part of those lies were true and what parts weren't. I do say that I've heard other speakers say this, and I've cringed when I've heard it, that what they share is not representative of Narcotics Anonymous. What I share is everything that I share came from Narcotics Anonymous. It came from you. It came from our literature. It came from the words and actions of the people who have been in my life for the last 20 plus years. And so it is Narcotics Anonymous. Because I came here a clean slate. Not intentionally, not because I wanted to be a clean slate, but I didn't remember anything. And lastly, I want to share that anything that I share that occurred prior to my getting clean may or may not be true. The reason for that simply is that, as I said, I came into this fellowship with no memories. I had none, literally. What I did shortly after I went into a halfway house that I was in is I went to my parole officer, who had more information about me than anybody in my life, including my family. And I asked him if I could read my record so that I could get an idea of what I just walked out of. And I did, over a period of about 3 weeks. It was a big record. And so what I've got in my life from my past is at that time, was highlights. Parole officers don't write things like he paid his rent this month, he paid his utility bill this month, he was a good guy at work. He got shot this time, he robbed this place, he was charged with this, he was in jail for this, he was in the hospital for this. And so for the first 2 or 3 years that I was clean, I got asked to share a lot because I traveled a lot, and I still do, and I may talk about that and I may not, because another thing that I do is I jump a lot. I have so many memories, so many stories, so much that has happened to me since I became a part of this fellowship that I never know where I'm going when my conversation or my sharing starts, because I always run up into a side road somewhere. And I choose to take the side road because that isn't my decision. My God gave me that road. Because if I would have taken the road that I started on, I would have been dead now, because that road only led to death. There was no other end to it. None. Nowhere did any of the doctors that dealt with me during that 38 years prior to coming here that told me that my actions were going to end up any other way. I don't talk about the past much, once again, because I don't have memories, also because I don't know where the relevance is. I believe with all my heart that the person that I became is not the person that I started out as. Step 2 is and always has been my grounding. My grounding. The idea that I could be returned to something that I didn't believe existed. At no point did I believe that I was sane. Step 2 tells me that I was, and that's where I'm going. A few things about the past that I do know. Makes my life sound more dramatic than it was, but I was born. Good start. When I was 20 minutes old, I had my first narcotics. Why, it doesn't matter, but I had them. When I was 7 years old, I was using every weekend. By the time I was 9, I was using daily. By the time I was 10, I was in boys' school. By the time I was 14, I was in the reformatory. When I was 17, I was in prison. Blah, 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 blah. I did 5 times in prison. I was getting ready to go back for my 6th time when the first recognized miracle, recognized by me, occurred. I was 37 years old. I'd been in prison 5 times. I hadn't worked in years. I went to my parole officer's office with a long sleeve shirt on because I had tracks going from my neck to my thumb. I was in jail for something associated with drugs. And my parole officer, who had revoked me twice before, came up to county jail and he says, I'm going to offer you an alternative to revocation. Now, back in 1985, they didn't even have a term alternative to revocation in the state of Wisconsin. And they sure as hell didn't have a place to put us. And I said, well, what is that? Well, I didn't ask him. I asked some of the guys in jail. I says, oh, man, that's great. I really appreciate this. Nobody's ever given me a break like this. And I walked away and I went back in the cell block and I asked the first guy I ran into, I said, what the hell is an alternative to revocation? And he says, I don't know. Ask John. And so I asked him and he says, I think it means that you don't go to prison. And I says, okay, I'm okay with that. The next day my parole agent comes up there and he says, well, the alternative that I've got is this. They had at that time a Department of Corrections drug treatment program called Excelsior House. Now, when I had been in prison in one of my reincarnations, I was the deputy warden runner, which meant I took passes all around the institution. I had this chevron on my sleeve, and we had pressed clothes, and we had a little pool table down in the basement. It was really interesting. And so I knew what Excelsior House was. And what it was, on paper, it said that it was a 6-month drug program. In reality, nobody had ever graduated from this without being there at least 11 months. And nobody had ever gone into this program from the streets. So they were going to put me in this program, and if I made it through this program, I was going to get off. I wasn't going to get revoked. So they had a screening where I went out there and there was a member from the security office out there. There was a psychiatrist out there. There was one other person. I have no idea who they were. I don't remember. There were 2 inmates in there and my parole officer. And so we're sitting in there and, they're asking me these questions and I'm giving what, if I remember correctly, I'm getting old and I forget things. If I remember correctly, I was giving these wonderful answers about why I wanted to go into this drug treatment program, which was ridiculous because I didn't want to go in this drug treatment program, but I did not want to go back to prison. And so it's going back and forth, and I'm thinking it's going pretty good. And then all of a sudden, one of the inmates says, what about your drug usage? I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I says, I drink. I don't do drugs. Well, I didn't realize it, but one of these inmates knew me personally from prison. And one of them had an uncle who knew me. And I used to deal when I was in the joint. I had, all 5 times I was there, I was in positions where I got out of the prison on a regular basis. And so there were a few stories going around about me. And one of these guys goes, the one that says, "What about your drug use?" And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't use drugs." And the other one said, "Bullshit." And he went on to give some story about me. And I looked at the two of them, and I said, "You know, the only difference between the two of you and me is that I can afford my drugs." And I turned around to my agent, and I said, "I'm out of here." So he took me back to county jail, waited 5 or 6 days, and I think what he was going to do was come back after this 5 or 6 days, and I was going to go, "Oh, I'm sorry, I really want the chance." And what I said to him when he walked up to the bars was, "You said alternatives to prison. That's plural, and what's the next option?" Well, you know, he goes in this thing, there's a local treatment center that owes me a favor. So he calls him up, he comes back in, and he said, "They'll take you if you've never had treatment before." And I said I hadn't, because I didn't believe that I had. Well, what I didn't know was one of the times that they put me in the nut house, they put me in what they called the drug treatment ward. And back then, it was 1972, back then, drug treatment meant put you in a room where they can lock the door and don't give you any drugs. Well, I didn't realize that that was drug treatment, so I said no. Well, they took me in this treatment center. Now, by this point, I can say that during that 6 or 8 weeks that I was in county jail and this whole process was going on, I continued to do what addicts do. The person who was directly responsible for me being in jail, after about 4.5, 5 weeks, I had convinced this person to say that the drugs they found in the house were hers, and that they were hidden because I was so deadly against drugs that she was hiding them so that I wouldn't throw them out. And I didn't do anything with it. I told her not to call the agent. I never brought it up. I never argued with it. Once again, not because I wanted to stop using. I didn't know that was possible. I didn't believe that I wanted to. I didn't know what the purpose of stop using was. All that I knew was that I was tired. I was tired of chasing dope. I was tired of selling dope. I was tired of getting up every morning sick. I was just tired. I was tired of prison. I was at a point where I didn't want to die. I didn't want to commit suicide. Suicide never crossed my mind, but I didn't want to live either. So breathing never crossed my mind. I was a dealer who hated everybody, absolutely everybody. I had a gun under the cushion on my couch. I had a gun in the refrigerator. I had a gun under my pillow. I had a gun under the front seat of my car. I'd sit on the couch and the people would knock on the door and I'd be shooting up and I'd tell them to come in. I didn't care. I didn't care if it was the police. I didn't care if it was the health department. I didn't care if it was the mailman. It didn't matter. So I went to treatment. I had given up. And I'd love to tell you that treatment was this life-changing experience, and I saw these bright lights every morning, and life became wonderful, and it didn't. As far as I'm concerned, I got one thing out of treatment, and that one thing isn't that I didn't use, because the fact of the matter is that when I was in treatment, when I was in the halfway house for a 3-month period or a 100-day period, if I used, I got kicked out. If I got kicked out, I got revoked. So the fact that I didn't use was self-preservation. It wasn't a desire. What I got out of it, though, was I went to my first NA meeting. Now, I love sharing this with people because I want to tell you why I chose NA. Because I hated everybody. Absolutely everybody. And NA was smaller than any other local fellowship. And if I went to the meetings that were in the other prevalent fellowship, they had 80, 90, 100 people or more. What back then would have been my home group, we didn't use that term back then, I was the 6th permanent member of the Oshkosh NA community. And believe me, I conduct 5 people a lot easier than I conduct 80 or 90 or 100. I mean, Christ, I was 38 years old. There wasn't this bobbing and weaving stuff, wasn't getting it. And so I went to NA. I went to NA and found a group of people who didn't care what I did, who didn't care where I came from, didn't care what I dressed like. I mean, they didn't care. They didn't say, how did you get here? And I don't mean they didn't care like they didn't care about me. They didn't care what I did in order to get there. They were just happy that I was there. And the one thing I'm going to tell you about that first group, because it influenced me to this day. There were 5 other members of that group. All 5 of those members did service work, and all 5 of those members traveled. And I literally believed until I was 2 years clean that everybody in Narcotics Anonymous traveled and everybody in Narcotics Anonymous did service work. Now, my first convention was in Indianapolis, MCRC 1 in August of 1985. Now, there were like 500 people there, and I'm going, Indiana's got to have it going on because they got like 500 service workers. I was so impressed. And it took me 2 years to find out that wasn't true, but by then it was so much a part of who I was that it didn't change. My struggle, my work, my efforts over the last 2 decades, by the way, when I shared at my home group, when I got my medallion, I had told them that 2 fascinating things about this anniversary is the fact that I could say decades, which is plural, which is like a cool thing, and 20 years as a score, which meant that I had a new score going on. And this was a good thing. My struggles today are about things that I strive to be. I know today that I'm the person that I never was because I never tried to be or never gave myself the opportunity to be. But more than that, I believe today that I can be even better than I am. I believe that I can be better in some way every day. And I also believe and know that the only way that I find that out is to continue doing what I do. Because when I'm alone, I don't notice anything that I've done or anything that I'm doing. It's those who are around me who let me see those things. After I got clean, after I'd been clean for 6 months, I got my first trusted servant position. It was a big step. It was a big step because I didn't believe that I had anything for anybody else at that point. It was a big step because I allowed somebody else to determine what it is, what my personal worth was. It also started me on a journey that's related to those things in the basic text that give me a direction, a place to go. Some of those things, like the spiritual principles of honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. Prior to getting clean, I used to think that I was one of the most honest people around. What I was is brutally honest. I used honesty as a weapon. And it could be anything from blunt honesty about how I felt you looked, or your intelligence, or what you had or what you didn't have, to honesty about anything around me. I had an opinion about everything. I believed that my opinion was better than anybody else's. In fact, to this day, I struggle with that. I'm winning the struggle, but it's a struggle. Honesty, the honesty that I have today starts with honesty from me, honesty about who I am. I have a lot of abilities. I don't know everything. I sometimes believe that I do, but thankfully, those beliefs come usually when I'm sitting in my living room or when I'm sitting in my camper out in some field at an NA function. Open-mindedness for me has got nothing to do with you. It's open-mindedness to those things that my eyes are being open to today. And willingness, I have a willingness to do anything. And that doesn't just mean a willingness to do those things that are right, those things that are correct. Because I don't learn just when I do those. I don't learn when I follow what you do. I learn when I incorporate what you do to make my life better. My efforts over the last 20 years have been primarily in the area of service. Because I've never been of service. I wasn't of service to my family. I wasn't of service to any of my employers, least of all to anybody who even tried to be a friend. I came into this fellowship. I can unfortunately say that I didn't have a single friend, not one. Anybody who had tried to get close to me over the previous 30 years gave up. They gave up. They just left. Everything in my life was that way. I'm not proud of saying it, but I can tell you that prior to getting clean, every single woman that I had a relationship with, the relationship would end in the space of an hour. And I never saw them again, ever. I mean, physically never saw anybody that I ever went out with again. I don't know that I'm doing a whole lot better today, except that I can tell you that the 5 intimate relationships that I've had since I've been clean were with 5 ladies, all in the fellowship, and all of them call me today, send me Christmas cards, come to my anniversary periodically. In fact, my ex-fiancée, I fly out to Texas and see her once or twice a year, her and her daughter, which is completely different from the past. Now, on the struggle side of that, I always love this one. The first 4 ladies that I went out with in this fellowship married the very next guy that they went out with. 4 of them in a row. And I believe that the 5th one would have done it, except for she ended up going out with a guy who she moved in with within 2 weeks. They were living together for 2 days, and he said he had a sleep disease and had to quit his job. So she was stuck with him at least for a year. But I've also learned through my involvement in service work that while my ideas are good, they're not the only ideas out there, which is what our fellowship depends on. My recovery depends on that. The things I do are the things I do. I do them because that's what I know. If I don't see what you're doing, if you don't tell me what you're doing, and if I'm not listening, I will continue to do those things. You know, the one thing that I've heard many, many things over the years, I was sharing with somebody today that I've been fortunate in that I've been to well over 200 conventions since I've been clean. I've been to hundreds of workshops and retreats and speaker jams. I have met, I've talked to, I've shared with thousands of people around the world. My joy. But in that, I've learned and heard and most importantly, watched what other people do. And one of the things that I heard early in my recovery that has influenced me ever since was when a Saturday night speaker somewhere shared that recovery is not natural for them because they were an addict. They did what an addict did. They thought what an addict did longer than they'd ever thought any other way. I started thinking like that the day I was born. I spent 30 years actively living that life. What I'm living today is completely alien from everything that I did. It's calling somebody up and saying I'm sorry, or saying something and having the ability to turn around and say, I didn't need to say that, is completely different from anything that I've ever done. Because I lived most of my life believing that I had the right to do, say, and think anything that I wanted. I learned in service work that it isn't doing the right thing that's important, it's doing something. Because unless you do something, you don't find out what's better. I also learned that I have what a lot of people don't have. I happen to love what I do. There's prices for what I do. I travel all the time. I put 50,000 miles a year on my vehicles and have put 50,000 miles a year on my vehicles for the last 12 years. Most of it involves Narcotics Anonymous, and most of it, to me this doesn't matter, to others that most of it is not paid in any way or reimbursed or whatever. Can everybody do that? Absolutely not. Prices I pay is that I don't have a home life. I haven't been out on a date in 10 years. Have no desire to go out on a date, not because it wouldn't be enjoyable, because I know that I'm not going to give up the lifestyle that I have. And you don't have relationships when you're gone every other weekend. Just don't do it. And so I don't start. I feel sorry for myself sometimes, a lot, but that's okay, because I have the ability to stop doing what I'm doing. I won't do it. I think part of the problem in not doing it is exemplified here. There are probably, well, it doesn't matter how many, there are a lot of people in this room. The only time I see them is here. If I stop coming here, I stop seeing them. If I stop going to Nebraska and Wyoming and South Dakota and Kansas, I'm going to stop seeing them because I can do what I do. Everybody can't. It'd be wonderful if we switched off every couple of years. I come down here for a couple of years and everybody I knew got on a couple of school buses and came up to Wisconsin and saw me, but that isn't the way it works. That is where I'm at now. What it has given me. I could literally, I got my watch sitting there because once I start talking about things in this fellowship, I have a tendency to get lost. Like I said, when I got clean in 1985, in August I went to my first convention in Indianapolis. 3 months later, I went to my second convention in Wisconsin. Other things that I started at the same time was I started service work. I started doing merchandise for the fellowship, and I've been doing it ever since. I love to sell. Now, I've heard a lot of people say, well, obviously you sold dope prior to coming into the fellowship because it shows. And once again, it's a two-sided thing. My selling benefits the fellowship. My selling also allowed me to stay in the fellowship because, as I said early on, I didn't want anything to do with anybody. Well, the best way to keep people away from you at a function is to put an 8-foot table between the two of you. And so I got really good at giving hugs over these tables, and I still do it to this day. I now care a lot about people, and that isn't the reason why I do what I do, but it was such an important thing in keeping me around here, because it kept you far enough away from me. It still allowed me to be a part of. It was appreciated. And we don't have a lot of people in the fellowship that do service work because they're just not made for it. You hear a lot of people talking about our lack of service workers in the fellowship. But the fact of the matter is, we've obviously have enough of them because everything that needs to get done gets done. Now we have some that fill in the blanks. I get the opportunity to take, it's not so bad here, but when I go west of the Mississippi and I take all that literature out there, I have the benefit of having people come up to the table and point out things and say, when did we write that? And they're talking about things like the introductory guide. Because west of the Mississippi, there are 4 service offices. They don't get the kind of stuff we have here. They're not living in an area that's got one in Minnesota and one in Wisconsin and one in Chicago and one in Missouri and one in Michigan. You know, we've seen all this stuff. They don't. And so I get to do things like take the newly revised, or the just for today, I took the first one out to Kansas and the first white book out to Nebraska. You know, which gives me joy, but gives them something that they didn't have as well. My big struggle today is the fact that I'm physically not supposed to do what I'm doing. If my doctor ever saw me doing what I'm doing, he's already told me that he will stop being my doctor. That if I can't listen to him, that he isn't going to treat me anymore. And so I have a tendency to tell him little stories, like there's people that always come and load the truck for me and unload the truck for me, and I hardly lift anything, and I'm at these conventions and I just sit and relax and there's no problem. Although I do things because I happen to like my doctor, he's the reason that I brought the pop-up camper that I've got. Because he told me that if you ever found out I went camping and laid on the ground, that was it. The biggest thing that I struggle with, as I said, is my physical condition. And getting old doesn't help that. About 6 or 7 months ago, I got an email from my ex-fiancée, and the opening line is, I understand now why old people talk about their health so much. Because it's the number one issue in your life. I believe that I'll die when I'm going to die. I don't believe that I can make it happen any quicker or any slower. I do know that in the last 2 years, I've had more diseases discovered through various blood tests and physicals and blah, 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 than I care to think about. But I'm still breathing. I'm still driving. I'm still doing things pretty much. I complain about it a lot. I'm tired all the time. But it doesn't stop me from doing the things that are important. My fear is that it will. My fear is that sometime I won't get to a location where I'm going and just have a numb leg. Sometime I won't be able to do it. I don't know what I'm going to do at that point, but I'm sure God will give me some idea before then. The one things that I was going to talk about a couple things tonight. By the way, don't think I'm getting done. I'm not. I haven't even started yet. Because what's happening is that I'm going around my stories. Because my stories, I never know how other people are going to react to them. But they're who I am. And the one thing that I want to add, I've got a friend in the audience who agrees or feels similar than I do about this. And what that is our history. You know, I came here, and since I've been here on Friday, I've heard about a couple of people dying. I got a call last night. A friend of mine died in Colorado. And while death is unfortunate, there's nothing I can do to stop it, although I sometimes think I could. But the fact of the matter is that the history of our fellowship is dying. And one of the things that I do is that I'm constantly talking about this fellowship. I talk about it because this fellowship has everything for anybody. It doesn't care who you are. You know, in our readings, it doesn't care who you are, what you did, or who your connections were. But more than that, it doesn't ask you for qualifications to come in here. It doesn't say that you have to do certain things in order to stay here. And so this fellowship brings in an unbelievable diversity of people. And I don't believe that we look at our diversity enough. I don't believe we accept it. I don't believe we listen to it. We've got a history, no matter where you go, that's not only is its own, but it's a story of strength. It's a story of fights. It's a story of love. It's a story of carrying through with things in spite of. And part of my belief in stories, part of my passing on of stories is because I believe that's important. You know, there are certain things that I do. I run the service office in Wisconsin, and I've had the honor of doing it for 10 years. And every so often people will come to Wisconsin, they'll call me up and they say, you know, can I come over and see the office? And I say, absolutely no problem, but I need to tell you something, and that's don't come over unless you got less than 45 minutes. Because I have stories about every piece of literature in that office. I was involved in some way in the writing of every piece of literature from the basic text on. I came here 18 months after the basic text hit Wisconsin. I have stories about every piece of literature, every piece of merchandise. I have a story for every convention that I've been to. And I take great joy in telling people those stories, because when I tell people my stories, they tell me theirs. I learned a long time ago that if you put 4 addicts together anywhere, and start telling a story, you will have hours of stories going. Do you remember the time when, you know, when you and so and me and we did this and we did this, and when this area started and that region started? Because the fact of the matter is that we're losing it. We're losing it. I live in an area called Inland Lakes, Wisconsin. I was one of the people that was responsible for forming that area. Do you know that there's less than, I bet you, 20 people in that area that know that? Less than half that area knows that I even lived there, that I was chair when it first formed, and blah, 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 blah. I think that's a problem. I think it's a problem that I read a book that was written by a former director of the WSO called My Years with Narcotics Anonymous, and I know a number of the people that are mentioned in that book, and those people aren't even contacted by people from the region, even though they were responsible for starting that region, or responsible for writing the basic text, or getting the basic text out there. And so that's been one of my things. The other reason I tell stories is because I'm so excited that I got stories. I can honestly tell you that, I'm going to go to a story. When I was engaged, we went to Kansas City. My fiance was from Iowa. I lived in Wisconsin. We were going to Kansas City to visit a friend who was in cooking school. And on Saturday night, this friend says, well, there's this function in St. Joseph, Missouri. Do you want to go? And so we said yes, and we get out there, and we're going out in the country. I mean, literally, we're on a dirt road. And the friend we went to visit turned to Tony, my fiance, and she said, well, you know, this is going to be kind of quiet. Do you really want to go out here? And Tony says, that's exactly why I want to go out here. She says, now we can spend some time with Gene, because he can't possibly know anybody 10 miles outside of St. Joseph, Missouri on a dirt road in some farm house. Hi. We walk in the door and two people go, "Hi, Gene." That's what you can do in this fellowship. You can go anywhere. You can call anybody. And if they don't know you, they will be there for you, because they've always been there for me. At 4 years clean, 4 years, nothing, 2 years, I got off parole, sidelight. My parole officer let me off parole 9 years and 10 months early because I had a year clean in this fellowship. So, got me believing. I graduated from college. I got off parole. I had just under 2 years clean. I decided that I was gonna reward myself. And so I took a credit card that I had gotten in the mail because I was in college. Now, people in college get offers for credit cards like left and right. Well, I didn't use it because it scared me to death. They kept saying I've got X number of dollars, and I kept going, "No, I don't." But I went, okay, I'm going to reward myself. So I went and rented a car, and I told them where I was going to go. I was going to go to Arkansas and all down south and Florida and Georgia and blah, blah, blah. They called and got the authorization. Well, I found out later they lied because my $500 credit card wouldn't cover the rental of the car for like 2 weeks and all this traveling, right? So they made up some mileage that came within the limit, and they got the authorization. They gave me the car. Well, one of the places I went was Georgia. And I go into Atlanta, and when I went into the Atlanta, I had the name or the telephone number for the House of the Rising Sun Clubhouse and for Motorcycle Ed. And so calling at 2 years clean, I'm still not this confident that anybody wants to even talk to me, so I'm not going to call Ed. So all day long, I'm trying to call the House of the Rising Sun Clubhouse. It would ring and ring and ring, and there'd be nothing. Well, I found out later that part of the problem was, I love this is pure NA. House of the Rising Sun had a phone, but they were only there for meetings, and they never answered the phone during meetings. See? And I asked somebody, I said, "Well, why do you have a phone then?" And they said, "Just in case." And I dropped it at that. I'm going, I don't even want to go into this any further. So I didn't get a hold of them, and I called up Motorcycle Ed. So I called them up, and I said, "This is Gene J. from Wisconsin. You don't know me, but you know some people I know." And he said, "Who's that?" And I said, "I don't know, but they gave me your number." And he said, I'd sent, somewhere along the line, I'd sent NA. And he says, "Well, where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm down by this Dunkin' Donut across from this truck, it wasn't Toys for Trucks, it was something similar to that." And he said, "I know exactly where you are, I'll be right there." So here he comes driving down on his Harley. This is early Motorcycle Ed. This is before he cut his hair and started wearing sport jackets, and this is early Motorcycle Ed. And he comes up and he says, "Follow me." And there was this friend that had gone with me from Wisconsin. So we go over to his house, we get in there, we sit down at the kitchen table, he throws a key on his table, and he said, "Well, I work during the day and you might want to go to meetings and go in and out, so here's a key." And I could not believe, I wouldn't believe that anybody that knew me would have given me their house key. This guy knew nothing about me, had never met me before, and he's giving me a key to his house and saying, "Come and go as you please." After that, at that point, I wasn't to the point where I loved people. For example, I hugged people because everybody hugged. I didn't hug anybody because I wanted to hug anybody. I just did it because that's what everybody did. We got in a circle and we closed the meeting and everybody hugged. And so I gave him a hug and I go about my business. But after that, as silly as it sounds today, I started trusting people because he had made a decision to trust me. The next 18 years have been a blur. You know, things have happened that have completely fascinated me. The one is I remember when I got every one of my key tags. I remember getting my 1-year medallion, and I was so proud. I remember getting my 2-year medallion, and I wasn't quite as proud. I remember getting my 3-year medallion, and feeling like I didn't deserve it. Because some of the old stuff started coming back. And what I mean by old stuff is that I didn't deserve it. And it wasn't that I didn't deserve it because I hadn't stayed clean for that 3 years. I didn't deserve it because I hadn't done everything that I should have. Now, I don't know what that means. I tell myself a lot of things that I don't know what they mean, but that's what I did. After my 3rd year, there were a number of years that I'm not absolutely sure that I even got a medallion. I do know there were a number of years that I never told anybody it was my anniversary coming up. A number of years that I got my medallions at different meetings than the one that I normally went to, until I hit my 13th year. And my 13th year, I woke up and I couldn't get out of bed. And I laid there for a while, and I'm not a person that lays in bed. And I got up and I was sitting at the table and I started crying. And I'm going, I'm not understanding this at all. And I went to the meeting, and by this time I had transferred home groups. My home group had been in my home area. In the last 7 years, my home group is in Milwaukee. It's in the inner city, and it's 85 miles from home, and it's an 8:30 Saturday morning meeting. And so I have to leave by 7 o'clock in the morning. And I've never missed my home group in 7 years. But I was going there, never missed it. I mean, I didn't go this Saturday because I was here, but if I'm in Wisconsin, I'm there. And I get to the meeting, and I'm talking to people, and we go to the meeting, and we had the clean time, or we went to clean time, and we get to multiple years of recovery, and I raised my hand. And just when I got up and started sharing, it came to me. What had happened, and I wasn't even aware of it, is that when I picked my 13-year medallion up, I had surpassed the amount of time that I'd done in prison. I'd done 12 and a half years in prison, and my 13 years clean meant that I was now clean longer than I'd been in prison. Today, the way I describe it to people is that I have now been clean longer than I've done anything except breathe. I've been clean longer than I've definitely worked in my life, absolutely longer than I've paid taxes in my life. And I'm actually over halfway, I'm 2/3 of the way to being clean as long as I used, which in the beginning was something I never, ever, ever believed was even a possibility. And so what my life has been in recovery is travel, meeting people, and trying to bring some balance into my life. I have a higher power, but my higher power is absolutely different than yours. I don't know if I get down on my knees, but I don't get down on my knees to pray. I get down on my knees to work on my humility, because I don't feel quite as powerful when I'm on my knees. I don't pray in the way that many people pray. My prayer are more on the order of this morning, telling everybody that I met just how absolutely beautiful this day was. I pray when I look up at the tree and see calmness. I look at a tree and see serenity. Trees are so unbelievably serene. They don't get upset about anything. It's just like, whoa. My prayers are thankful prayers. I don't start with, dear whoever. I'm grateful for everything that's come into my life. I'm grateful for those moments when I'm not in pain. I'm grateful for the fact that there are some medications out there that are helping keep me alive. Today I happen to like being alive. I don't necessarily like the medications, but the only reason I don't like them, quite honestly, is because they cost me a lot of money. I have no problem with the fact I'm taking them, because I learned a long time ago that things like if the doctor gives me mind or mood altering drugs, I don't have to keep them in the house. Guess what? I can leave them at the hospital and they have to hand them out to me. You don't get charged for it. It's a service that hospitals will do. So I don't have narcotics in my house. I don't need to have them. I go to the hospital and get them. And they give me one at a time, and it's fine. I don't have to do them that often. It's just sometimes it gets really bad, and therefore I do. I have to do other medications that are not in mind and mood altering. And if I don't do them, I'm done dancing. Well, I'm done literally dancing anyhow, but the idea of being able to do what I do. So my God is my God. Parts of them have come from every one of you, but it's still my God. And I found no reason to change my God. It's been very good to me, and he continues to be good to me. Other places where I lack in balance is definitely in self. For somebody that came into this fellowship believing that he knew every goddamn thing there was, I'm sure not there now. I don't do what I'm supposed to do. I don't eat the way I'm supposed to do. I've been talking to people. It fascinates me. I come to things like this and eat 3 meals a day. I go home and I might eat 1. And I'm going to tell you, these are my 2 primary meals. It's either one of them's a frozen pizza, or the other one is 3 Nuke baked potatoes, smashed up and butter all over them, and sour cream and salt and pepper. That's my diet. And then I'll have a quart of ice cream every day or day and a half or 2 days. And then I come here and I eat 3 days. So I don't eat the way I should. I was talking to somebody he asked me if I was going to Hawaii, and I said yes, and he says, well, how long do you think it'll affect you, the jet lag thing? And I says, it won't. I says, sometimes I leave for conventions at 2 o'clock in the morning. I may go to sleep anywhere from 11 o'clock at night to 3:30. I start doing something on a computer and I forget what time it is. I might sleep 4 hours a night, I might sleep 8. I don't have a biological clock. I broke it 20 years ago, and I haven't bought a new one. So there is no jet lag, and I don't take care of myself. I just don't. I can't exercise, and I'm not talking about I don't want to. I know what exercise would do, but I can't physically, I can't. I have a spinal injury, and I can't do anything. I can't ride a stationary bicycle, and I can't climb steps and get whatever those Bowflex things are. I can't do any of that stuff. And I still have residual stuff left over when I first came to this fellowship, because I sure as hell didn't care about me when I got in here. It's gotten a little better. Eating a pizza or 3 baked potatoes a day is better than not eating at all. Not a lot. Yes, it's starting to show. Service puts everything else out of kilter. And when I say service, I'm not talking about an organized service position. I'm talking about service in answering the phone when somebody calls and not telling them that you have to leave on an appointment right away when in fact you're watching a TV show. Service is being at your home group meeting every week, because not only does my life depend on it, but it does for the newcomer too. One of the most fascinating things about my home group, among many, is that they have a tradition ever since this group started. And what that is that after medallions are given out and the person with the year or more clean time does a little bit of sharing, members of the group will come up and give gifts at the same time they talk about how that member has affected their recovery. Well, this year, my anniversary came on the same weekend as our area convention. And so a lot of people completely forgot it was my anniversary, which is no big thing. I mean, they got the area convention going on. It's the fourth one we've had. Everybody is real excited. And so nobody brought me a gift to the meeting. So what they did is, as they came up and shared how I played a part in their recovery, is they gave me money. $165 worth of money. And so I didn't want to look at what they gave me. I mean, because that's kind of rude. It's like, here, this is for you. How much is it, right? So I'm putting it in all different pockets so that later on I can go, oh yeah, Mike gave me 20 and so and so. But it was $165. And the $165 is nice. I haven't worked in 2 years. But more than that, more than the gifts is what they say. See, I don't know how many of us understand how we affect others. To have a member with 7 years clean come up to the front of the room and say, this is the first meeting I came to, and Gene is the first person that talked to me for more than 10 seconds. Gene was the first one that gave me a ride, or Gene was always here. To hear a member share, the reason I came every week is because I wanted to see him not come. Because every week I saw him, I knew that in fact it could work. At the same time, I'm telling myself it won't work. That's what we mean to those around us. And so self is pretty much on the back burner. For the sake of balance, I'd like to change that. I'm not quite sure how I'll do it. And what I mean for the sake of balance is I'm referring to our universal program and the four sides and the God, self, service, and society. And the fact of the matter is the pyramid does not stand with three sides. Drooping pyramids do not count. And you're not widening your base. So it's something that I will work on. It's something that I'm getting a little bit better on. Society, my involvement with society is wonderful, wonderful. I have my favorite story in relation to this, in where I come in relation to society, is when I was about 3 years clean, I was on a city, Oshkosh City board. And I don't even know what we did. It was some kind of board. Well, one of the members of that board was the last judge who sentenced me. And after we were there a couple of weeks, he comes up to me and he says, where do I know you from? And I says, I don't know. And he says, I know you. Well, we were part of this board for like 9 months. And during that 9 months, he never figured out that I was somebody that he had sentenced to 5 years for dealing. He was the last judge to sentence me. Because the context was all wrong. Dope dealers do not get on city commissions. Dope dealers do not sit there every week and talk semi-sane. That's my involvement in society. My not dealing puts me in good standing with society. The fact that I have not had a police officer at my house in 20 years goes real well, although there are still people in the police department who are waiting for me to mess up. Not paranoia, they told me. They told me in one way or another, you're going to mess up someday, because drug dealers, addicts never change. They'll get over it. Like I said before, a number of different ways, and the last thing that I want to talk about, because it is my joy, and that's service work. I have done everything in this fellowship. As Derek referred to, I was RD. In fact, I was RD and RDA for 5 straight years. And I don't know why, because it's never happened in Wisconsin. Wisconsin got this tradition of having new people every year. But I've run the service office in Wisconsin for 10 years. I am, once again, it is not a pat on the back. It's involved a personal belief. I'm the last volunteer running a service office in the world. And the only reason I do that is because I wouldn't have any idea how to charge for it. I wouldn't know how much to get paid. And more than that, I have this great fear of me no longer doing the service office. And the fact of the matter is that I have the joy of selling all weekend at 12 to 15 conventions a year all over the country. And nobody will do that, not anymore. And we do a lot of our sales then based on going to those conventions. And if people don't go there, we're not going to make the money, and we're going to end up in the same place that we were when I started 10 years ago. But there's, like I said before, there's other kinds of service. One of them is being here. One of them is talking and whatever. Service work is just doing that. Anything that you do that gets you outside of you is doing service work. We no longer talk about, picking up ashtrays and things like that, buying candles or whatever. All I know is that I came into this fellowship with nothing, asked for nothing because I didn't know what to ask for, even if I would have believed it was possible for somebody to give it to me, have given next to nothing. In comparison to what I get, going to a meeting once a week or twice a week or 3 times a week is just like so insignificant. Reading my literature once a day or once every other day is really so insignificant. Doing what I do in relation to the office, coming here and spending hours talking to people who are important in my life takes away all the work involved in what I did to get here. Service work does not take, it gives. Once again, that doesn't mean that everybody should do it, but it does mean that everybody needs to support those who do it, because that's one of the reasons that we do. Even though I say it isn't important, every single postcard that I've gotten from somebody that I've dealt with in relation to the business of the service office in 10 years is in a little card rack on the desk. Every one of them. Does that mean that I need those to keep doing what I do? No, but it means I'm sure glad that I got them, and it means that I'm not going to throw them away. We all have a choice in what we do in this fellowship. The choice that we don't have is to do nothing. one of the saddest things and one of the primary reasons why I moved my home group 7 years ago was not because of anything that the people at that meeting did. It was the fact that I was the old-timer in the group. And that's crazy. I wasn't the first one in Oshkosh to get clean, or Nina Menasha or Appleton, all places that I know, and you might not, but I was the only one that was at the meeting every week. And to see people coming on a regular basis every year to come and get their medallion, share with the group how much they missed everybody and how there was this void in their life. I'm sorry. Is it you? No. Oh. How there's this void in their life, and 2 weeks later they stopped coming until the following year. I was tired of coming to a meeting for myself and being asked what's going on in the area and what's going on in the region, expected to have answers that I didn't have and didn't care that I didn't have. And so I stopped going to that meeting. Hopefully I will be going to meetings for the rest of my life. Hopefully I'll have a long life. I do know that if I continue to do what I do, I will continue to get all the things that I've gotten. The saying we had on the wall at a correctional halfway house that I ran for a number of years, if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you always got. And the only way that I can stop doing what I've always done is to do something different. And one of those things is to listen. One of those things is to hear what other people have to say. Another thing is to look at what other people do. I picked both of my sponsors on the basis of what I saw, not what I heard, what I saw. I saw my first sponsor walk up to a group of or two guys that were arguing so hard I thought they were going to punch each other in a second. And he got within 4 feet of them, and it looked like somebody just doused them with water because they just calmed down. And I wanted that. In my second sponsor, I saw him do service work, maintain a relationship, get involved in church, do all those things all at the same time. And everybody looked like they were happy with what he did. And I wanted that. I'm sorry to say I'm looking for a new sponsor because I no longer want what he does, because I found out one of the things is he doesn't go to meetings. But that's how we get what we get. You want what I got? Go out and get it. Like I said, I haven't worked in 2 years, but I'm telling you, without doing anything out of the ordinary, I'm going to Hawaii. The nice thing about going to Hawaii is I'll see the people that I met in Japan 4 years ago. This fellowship can once again give you anything you want. Figure out what you want. If you don't know what you want, ask somebody else. They'll tell you. They'll at least tell you what you need or what you need to do different. I'm going to close because I have to really, really, really go to the bathroom. Thank you very much.